You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Wednesday, the 2nd of October. I'm Holly Wainwright, and Mia and I have already been talking all morning today.
We have.
Because we watched the vice presidential debate together. For those of you who are obsessed with US politics, as we are, it's going to drop tomorrow. It's with Amelia Lester, of course, telling us what's what. Did JD Vance win? Did Tim Walz win? Will it make any difference? It drops tomorrow for our subscribers.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
And on the show today, the biggest pop star in the world right now needs a mental health day, and her fans are really not happy about it. Kids, get off screens and out into the world. But no, not like that. The hoo-ha around a TV anchor, her son, and a very long train ride. Also, do you want to know what all the fuss is about the movie The Substance, but you don't want to watch body parts exploding? We have got you covered. But first,
Israel's invasion of Lebanon. Iran's ballistic missiles shot at Israel. More innocent lives lost in what is being called the most dangerous moment in the history of the modern Middle East. Israel has launched a ground invasion in southern Lebanon, and the Israeli military has described this invasion as limited, localised and targeted raids against Hezbollah. Hezbollah, however, claim that there are no troops in Lebanon. While Israeli airstrikes continue in Lebanon, officials say that more than 1,000 people have been killed in the past 2 weeks, Iran has now launched a missile strike on Israel. Hezbollah, recognised as a terrorist group, has been trained and armed by Iran for 4 decades, and now Iran's direct involvement is seen as a major escalation of a war now being fought on multiple fronts. On Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told his security cabinet, "Iran made a big mistake this evening and it will pay for it. Whoever attacks us, we will attack them." Look, what we know is that this war has escalated, and every moment this conflict goes on, we see more loss of innocent civilian life. For more on this fast-moving crisis, listen to The Quickie, our daily news podcast. There's a link in our show notes.
26-year-old pop star Chappell Roan is having the best and worst few months of her life, and things seem to be picking up speed in both directions. We spoke about her pushback video that went viral about how her fans were too much and she was telling them to back off when she's in public. And now she has cancelled 3 festival appearances. She shared a statement on social media saying, "I apologise to people who've been waiting to see me in New York and DC this weekend at All Things Go, but I am unable to perform. Things have gotten overwhelming over the past few weeks and I'm really feeling it. I feel pressure to prioritise a lot of things right now and I need a few days to prioritise my health. I want to be present when I perform and give the best show possible. Thank you for understanding. Be back soon." In the last 2 years, Chappell Roan, that's her stage name, her actual name is Kaylee Rose Amstutz, she's done 187 concerts, with 104 this year alone. I went back and looked because you know how Taylor Swift is doing a big Eras tour? Chappell Roan is doing a different thing where she performs at lots of different festivals. She performs like her 3 songs. Sometimes she headlines, sometimes she's just one of many acts. And so it's kind of a way of reaching lots and lots of people, and, you know, often the video, the social from it will go on YouTube and it'll go viral on social. She's really blown up in these past few months. Her album Midwestern Princess has top charts, and singles like Hot to Go, Good Luck Babe and Pink Pony Club have become anthems and won all these awards. She performed at the Grammys a few weeks ago and won Best New Artist. And also, there've been in the last few weeks a bunch of big cover stories that have dropped in interviews, like a cover story of Rolling Stone, where she's sort of spoken in depth about how she's finding fame. And even though she's been a performer for a really long time, this level of viral fame and how sudden it is has been a bit of a shock to her system. So what's changed over the last few weeks is that she's also found herself, because of these interviews, in a controversy when it comes to the US election, because in one of the interviews, she made some remarks about refusing to publicly endorse a candidate in the US election. Taylor Swift recently came out and endorsed Kamala Harris, but she said, "I have so many issues with our government in every way." And those remarks really blew up overnight. And A lot of people were furious with her and accused her of supporting Donald Trump because she said she wouldn't endorse Kamala. And so then she had to clarify, which she did in a series of videos in her stories on Instagram, that she would be voting for Kamala, but that an endorsement like tailor-made was different, and she wasn't comfortable with that level of alignment because there were Democratic policies that she didn't agree with. Here's a little bit of one of those videos where she was sort of becoming increasingly angry and upset with commenters who were criticizing her.
I just woke up and to like people just skewing it even more. Endorsing and voting are completely different. I don't agree with a lot of what is going on with like policies. Like obviously fuck the policies of the right, but also fuck some of the policies on the left. That's why I can't endorse. That's why I can't like put my entire name and my entire project behind one.
So in these videos, she sort of would finish making her point and then she'd come back to try and clarify it again. And we've seen this before in the past. Maybe some of us have even tried it in video form where you start brawling with your commenters and you start, trying to explain yourself and then they come back and back. And it's hiding to nowhere, really. And it was a day or so after these videos were posted that she cancelled these concerts. But Jessie, the response to the cancellation itself has been really interesting because she's clearly someone who is struggling with fame. She wears her heart on her sleeve. She is bipolar, according to her, and has struggles with mental health. So you would think that people would be understanding when she cancelled these concerts, but that's not what happened.
Especially a generation who is more literate and compassionate about mental health than I would think any other generation until they lose their tickets, until the festival that they wanted to go to on the weekend doesn't have Chappell Roan.
So people were then shouting at her not just about who she supported or didn't support her endorsement, but they were shouting at her about cancelling the concert.
So there are viral TikToks that have millions and millions of views that have been popping up on my feed all week that say things like, "Ma'am, you cancelled your set at a festival because you are stressed. You have been famous for maybe 4 months. Justin Bieber endured that stress you're encountering for his whole life." I mean, footnote that Justin Bieber doesn't appear to really perform anymore.
Also great in himself.
The other sentiments were sort of like, wish I had the privilege to cancel on my job commitments when I'm not feeling 100%. Unfortunately, I'd be homeless. No one else in the world can cancel work because they're stressed.
Well, that's not true.
That's absolutely not true. And another comment that was getting a lot of traction was, therapy has just given everyone permission to prioritize their mental health, to just be selfish and mean to everyone else. So we think that we've made a lot of progress when it comes to understanding the toll that fame takes on people and also that you might need a mental health day. Like in everyday life, there are situations where we would like to think that if someone put their hand up and said, I actually can't come to work tomorrow, I need a mental health day, then we'd be way more understanding than we were a generation ago. But this is symptomatic of how we see Roan as a product and not a person. Like, I paid for you and now you're not going to be there? And how about my hotel and how about my outfit? And in fact, I think that frustration is probably valid. Like, I would be really upset. But to direct it, I keep thinking how she must be feeling right now. What it must take for an artist with her team and with her fame to not turn up to a show is enormous. And in fact, this one, the festival that she's pulled out of, was just a day before. And a lot of people are going, you should have given us more notice. To me, that says she really wanted to do it. And she realised that she couldn't. And that, I feel an enormous amount of compassion for that.
She's such an interesting study in overnight fame because it is like literal overnight fame. As you say, she's been doing it a long time, but her fame has accelerated like a rocket. And probably a lot of these bookings were in the diary before she was who she is right now, right? Because Chappell Roan could fill a stadium on her own now. She doesn't really need to be doing festival shows, but I'm sure that a lot of these commitments were a long time ago. And she is in literally a cyclone of attention and she's trying to figure out how to deal with it. One of the things that I think is really interesting is rock stars, pop stars, musicians, whatever you want to call them, have always flaked out of shows, right? And usually they would just tell you, oh, they've got a cold. They're dealing with a chest infection at the moment or whatever, when it could have been mental health, it could have been addiction, it could have been whatever.
True.
The thing with the Chappell Roan is she is trying to be still the person that she probably has always been, who is somebody very honest, very authentic, very wearing my heart on my sleeve. So even the way she talks about politics in that whole fuck the left, fuck the right, I'm trying to explain to you this nuanced critical thinking piece, is something that any really professional, high-level artist with a team around them would be told, do not do that. Either say nothing or say something definitive, but don't start trying to actually talk like a real person and start a real conversation with your fans.
With nuance.
Because that's not going to go anywhere good. And so it's almost like you've given too much of yourself. You've handed over this pound of flesh. So she's telling the truth about why she's not turning up to these festivals, which is, I am so overwhelmed. I can't handle it. I don't think I can do it. I feel so vulnerable out there. I've got to be happy. I've got to perform. I'm an arm's reach away from everybody. And she can't do it. In the old world, her team would have just said, Chappell's got flu. You know what I mean?
She posted a story as well, not a post, which means that people can't really respond.
And she's closed comments on
videos
that
which
we just played.
I think tells us something. And I was also thinking, to the people who are like, turn up, you had a job to do, the rest of us are doing our jobs. I mean, that is just such an unempathetic way to live your life. But I keep thinking about Avicii. So his real name was Tim Bergling, and if you have seen the documentary Avicii True Stories, you'll see that he had a meteoric rise to fame and he started doing maybe 50 shows a year. And I think in the final year, he did about 250 shows and he has infections and like his body is falling apart. And it's not just the performing, it's the whole
it's what goes with it.
It's what goes
travel,
with it.
And also festivals, there's an enormous amount of output there. You're backstage with a whole lot of other people.
It's incredibly
the energy of it. It's not Taylor Swift in her very well-organised machine world.
Bergling, in the end, died by suicide and was such an incredible artist. But we forget these lessons. You watch that and you see how, you started by saying it's the best time of Roan's life and the worst. I don't think there is any best for Roan right now. Maybe in the future she'll see it, but I think she's living in hell. I think she is hating every minute of this.
It's objectively the best time in her life because as a performer or an artist, this is what you dream of. You dream of Elton John calling you up and every pop star shouting you out and
everyone telling you how much your songs mean to them
and winning awards and going on stage to all these people and everyone wanting you and the cover of Rolling Stone. Like all of these things are these objective milestones in what it means to be a successful artist in the music industry. And I think that's probably what makes it harder because it's funny, Claire's got this podcast called But Are You Happy? When often the objective measures of success don't bring you the happiness and they actually bring with them a whole lot of shit that you never thought about. And what's so clear to us sitting back, not saying that we're famous, but we, over a long period of time, as our public profiles have grown, we have learned what you can and can't do and what is a highway to poor mental health. And it's really unfortunate because sometimes you want to try and have a conversation and your humanity is being questioned or your decisions are being questioned or people are saying lies about you and you want to push back or explain yourself better and you think it's going to end well. And you have to do it a lot of times before you realize it's actually not going to end well. It's not going to end well for you and you're not going to change the mind. Like she wasn't changing the mind of anyone who was slagging her off.
So you think that those videos have contributed to the poor mental health?
100%. And to play devil's advocate, and this sounds like I'm victim blaming and I'm not at all, but the people who are like, here's our contract. I pay for my ticket and I expect you to show up and I expect you to do what's required so that you can show up, whether it's not staying up all night and partying, and that's clearly not what she's doing, or not doing things that are going to make you mentally unwell so that you have to then take time off. So I guess I can understand, like, because we all look at it and go, oh, Chappell, what are you doing? Like, just stop, just step away. And this idea of her team should protect her. When you become that famous that fast, not everybody has a tree pain. That's Taylor Swift's famous publicist, and the right people around them. I mean, interestingly, Travis Kelce even this week just sacked his whole publicity team. So sometimes the people you have around you aren't equipped.
Well, and they're probably scrambling. Like, this has been so fast. So
Which is no one's fault.
The people that she has around her are probably people she really trusts and knows, right? But the thing is that the sad thing that has to happen is that really for her to protect her mental health, and not that we necessarily know this, but is a wall needs to go up between her and her fans. And she probably hates that idea. Everybody does, you know, like she wants to be able to jump on live and say, this is what I think about this. And you guys know the real me and all those things. I'm sure that's very important to her because she's an artist and she's a brilliant artist and she's clearly sensitive and she's clearly got, you know, she's been very open about her mental health. And unfortunately, one of the things she's going to need to do to protect herself if she wants to keep on doing this is put walls up, right? Like between her and her audience, her and her fans, her and what events she will do, won't do, where she can travel to, what the schedule's got to be like, what time she needs. Like anytime you talk to anyone that level famous, whether you listen to interviews with them or you hear them talking on But Are You Happy or shows like that, they'll say, I had to learn what I needed to do to protect my mental health, to be able to keep doing the thing I love. And it's that unpopular word, boundaries.
Yes,
and Roan, and I'm not saying this in any way to blame her, but I think that what we're literally seeing in real time with how she's grappling with fame and this unbelievable attention being the person she is, she's working that out in real time and it's really hard.
Yeah. I agree with everything that you say, but I would add that maybe what we're seeing with trying to convince her fans and going back and whatever, which is a strategy that we know doesn't necessarily work, but I can see and feel her desperation and I have felt it to just be understood. I think that's why people are artists, to try and be understood. Yeah. I wonder if this is all symptomatic rather than a cause. If she is, and she's said before that she suffers from severe depression and bipolar 2, these preceded her fame. Yeah. All of these stresses would, you know, be really difficult. But I worry about us saying, and not just about Roan, but about people in our own lives when we go, you know, they're really struggling. And I've seen it and I've been at the receiving end of it too. Like, you know, she's really depressed, but she's not exercising every day. And if she just ate a little bit better and, you know, I don't think that she's seeing her psychologist enough, which, yes, but the nature of mental health is that, like, the spiral is part of it, if that makes sense. I don't want mental health. We talk about it as an illness, but there's also an element of it being your responsibility, which we don't do with other illnesses. Yeah. If she had
a broken leg.
Yeah.
So the thing is the people who are disappointed that she's not going to be at the festival that they are going to, although they're going to see lots of other people, they'll get over it. Yeah. And if she had broken a leg and it was like Chappell Roan isn't performing today because she'd broken a leg, they would also be disappointed, but they'd get over it.
Yeah.
But what if she'd have broken a leg because she was skydiving or skateboarding or skiing?
Is that what we're saying that she's doing though?
Like, no. I'm just drawing
for example, I was at a writers' festival a little while ago in quite a remote location. Took a really long time to get there. And I went to do this panel. And before we started the panel, someone came over and said, there was meant to be 4 of you and now there's 3 of you. One of the people on the panel can't do it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, no worries. And in fact, to be completely honest, I'd had food poisoning that night. And I just went, oh, they can't, like, I've been throwing up, da-da-da. And they said, this person had a panic attack and hasn't had that before. And I thought about it and I went, imagine traveling all the way to this remote location to speak on a panel. Imagine the distress, how much pain you must be in. And anyone who's experienced severe depression or panic attacks knows that there is nothing more debilitating. It's your head. And when your head's not working, you feel like you can't do anything right. I think that there's a lack of compassion in this story.
Mamamia out loud! You know how we keep being told that kids need to get off their phones and touch some grass? Well, good luck with that, because depending on how far away from your watchful eye that grass is, you might just find yourself in a pile of poo. That is the experience of British TV presenter Kirsty Allsop, who's at the centre of a big ding-dong in the UK because she thought that her 15-year-old son could do with a bit more independence. Now, you probably don't know who Kirsty is, and for the purposes of this story, you don't need to. She presents a lot of UK TV shows, notably the ones about houses like Location, Location, Location and Love It or List It. She lives in a fancy bit of London and she sent her son, Oscar Hercules, off travelling with a friend on a train. Over the course of a few weeks in the northern summer, He travelled to Paris, Brussels, Amsterdam, Berlin, Munich, Marseille, Toulouse, Barcelona and Madrid with a 16-year-old friend. We call this in Europe interrailing. You get a ticket, you can jump on and off trains and you go around Europe.
Did you do that?
No.
Okay.
I did not do that.
Is that because it was expensive?
Isn't it because it was expensive?
Oh, is it a common thing that 15-year-olds do?
It's a common thing. It's like in English education, you have these two gaps. So when you're at the end of what would be here year 10, so that could be 15 turning 16, is you do your GCSEs, and that's where he was, right? So she said he was just a bit young for his year. The friend he went with was 16. And then if you carry on with school, then you do your A-levels at 18, so year 12-ish, and then you may or may not continue to uni. Anyway, she spoke about this trip on social media, and shortly afterwards, she got contacted by the local social services, saying that the matter had been reported to them and they'd opened a child protection file. Allsop, who's a pretty famous person in the UK, insisted that she had decided to allow Oscar to go because society has become increasingly risk-averse and children need to develop the confidence that only comes from trusting them. And we do hear that a lot. She also said, of course, because everybody says this, that she'd read all those Jonathan Haidt reports from that book about the anxious generation, that we protect too much offline and not enough online, and decided to walk her walk. Confidence, she says, comes from trust and independence, from doing things by yourself. My son is capable. It was his idea, his plan, his savings. He came to me and said, can I do this? And I saw no reason for saying no. And when I mentioned that he'd done it, I wanted it to be inspiring. As you can imagine, her critics have jumped on. It went crazy. They were like, you're irresponsible. How terrible. And she has written a lot about how she really believed that it was a very important rite of passage for him. And she makes the point, she says, the child services thing is just absurd and made me very angry. If anything, it's a distillation of where we've got to, but it isn't the main issue. The main issue is that so many people seem to think the world is a more dangerous place to travel in, yet modern communications, safer transport and better emergency health means it's actually a safer place to travel in than it's ever been. What do we think, friends?
Mia, would you let a 15-year-old travel to another country? Well, actually, interstate is probably a better comparison.
She wants to make the point that in England and Europe, she said the actual distance covered, it probably wouldn't have got you out of New South Wales. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of actual distance, she said if we were in Australia, you probably would be out of New South Wales. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's going to different... That's a lot of countries. I'm like,
I know, what a trip.
I've got massive envy of this 15-year-old. I want his life. It's tricky, isn't it? I'm really in agreement. I've read a lot and thought a lot about the fact that if you don't let children take risks, then they get to 18 and it's suddenly like, okay, you can have alcohol, you can drive a car, all bets are off. You're free. You can do whatever you want now. And they've had no practice in navigating risk and assessing risk because we've never given them a chance to build that muscle through their life. And that's the argument behind free-range parenting, isn't it? That, you know, we mean well, but we think that it's our job to protect our children from all the risks and walk them around the fire, not hold their hand while they walk through it. And so, yeah, I mean, I've got a 16-year-old. You know, we were overseas a couple of years ago when my daughter was 16, maybe 17. She really wanted to come home. She was not feeling great and not enjoying this trip. So we allowed her to fly home from Greece alone and then just be at home for a week or so until we got back. I mean, look, we could track her phone. We could do all of those things. And when she was 18, every night I was checking where she was when she was just recently traveling for 6 weeks. It's scary as a parent, but what a gift you give your child.
Yeah, and what the criticism can never take into account, which I think should be the mantra of the internet, is that the mum or the dad or the caregiver knows the kid better than you do. So your 15-year-old might just in terms of maturity not be there. We don't know her 15-year-old. I think she knows her kid. She knows what her kid is capable of. But what this story speaks to is the rub between the messaging we're getting in all the books, and I'm getting it very, very loudly, which is about independence, parents that are over-functioning, and how there is this link between less freedom and trust and more mental health concerns. So we go, okay, we've got to give them freedom and independence and play and don't get too involved and all of those things. But then the second you enact any of that, child services are called or whatever.
And even if not child services are called, the judgment upon you from other people
is enormous. Yeah. And
that's one of the tricky things.
Exactly. And the other thing I thought about this story was this is why you should never say a parenting decision you make out loud on the internet.
So true.
It's like anything that I choose, whether it's like feeding or what, and I know that sometimes it can be really helpful, but I'm like, I personally can't handle, nor do I give a shit what anyone else thinks about
Don't
this.
you think you often don't realise until you do say it, and then there's pushback and you go, oh, I didn't realise this was a problem. Sometimes the internet is what tells you. I remember getting my son a smash cake for his birthday when he was, 8. I posted a funny video about it and it ended up in the Daily Mail about people were upset about the violence, and I was teaching my child violence because all the kids like smashed it and then all ran over the top of each other trying to get the lollies out.
And they wonder why the well-being of parents is really, really low. And
then other people were being critical that I bought the cake and it cost like $100 and why didn't I just make the cake?
It's interesting to me that the title of Haidt's book about the kids is The Anxious Generation, but actually the Gen X parents who are making these decisions, we're fucking anxious because we live 2 hours south of Sydney. My daughter's started making that train trip on her own a bit in school holidays, come see a friend or whatever. And when I put her on that train, of course I say to her, like, if a creepy guy sits next to you or if something happens or the train breaks down or da-da-da-da-da, like, but every time she does it, she might face a situation where she's going to, like, most likely, and what's generally happened, she gets on the train, she gets off the other end, she has a great time. But every time she does get on the train, there is a chance that something might happen. And I was thinking that actually when I was about the age of Oscar Hercules, I didn't go off interrailing, but me and a friend did catch a train from France to Italy where my parents were on holiday, and it was an overnight train. There was a carriage down the train of football hooligans. This was an era of football hooligans, the late 80s. And they were scary guys and they were drunk and they gave us loads of shit. And we were scared, right? Whatever, we survived. It wasn't particularly pleasant and we had a story to tell everybody. But that could have gone bad. You know, it definitely could have gone bad. And it could go bad every time I put my daughter on a train. And the fear of judgment is one of the things that paralyzes parents. One of my mates says this to me all the time. She's like, if something happens, imagine what everyone will say. Not because they're a public figure, but just like people in your world is they'll say, well, what did you think putting a 14-year-old girl on a train when there might be drunk guys getting on at that station and there might be boys doing this and shit and her phone might run out of battery and the train might break down and she won't know where to go and then she'll be wandering the streets and then someone could come and like they're piling the anxiety and the judgment onto you. So you have to actually be a very confident, centered parent in this day and age to go, and I'm not necessarily defending Kirsty Allsop because I think she's probably a bit out there, but it's like you have to be a very...
What do you mean? Do you think she shouldn't have done it? It was too much?
No, I don't think she shouldn't have done it, but the way she defends it of like, oh, it's a rite of passage and all those things, I just think that's not really true, you know. But I think you have to be such a confident, grounded, I can handle it parent to go, no, I believe in my choices and I believe in my kid. And that's very hard to do from whether they're little and you're talking about feeding or whether they're 14 and you're putting them on a train.
Allsop did speak to something that's very true, though, which is that the world is actually safer than it's ever been. But because of our exposure, and I found this with babies, everything that's ever gone wrong with a baby, I now read. Because it's served to me in an algorithm. So you will see every story about that 14-year-old girl, whether it is near your house or whether it's on the other side of the world. And so our sense of scale or our sense of likelihood or probability is totally thrown out. There was a great article, though, in The Atlantic about lighthouse parents. I really liked that terminology, which was the idea that similar to a lighthouse, you provide a bit of light, a bit of stability so that the ships can see their way. This parent kept saying, and I think she worked in education or something, and she said when her child comes home and says, I'm being bullied or whatever, rather than go, here's what you should do and I'm going to call the teacher, she'll say, like, how did you deal with that and work through it a little bit, which is idealistic, but I think it's probably a good place to start. And she's all about missteps before mastery. So there's got to be the...
Let them wobble.
Let them wobble.
Yeah, it can be hard though. It can be like, when is it irresponsible to let them wobble and when is it potentially dangerous?
And what are the stakes of the wobbling?
What are the stakes of the wobbling? What's interesting though, it's funny, we're talking all about this and parents and being judged, and none of this is about the kid because every
had a great
kid
time.
has always taken risks, like the shit I did when I was 15. But my parents weren't judged for it because they didn't know.
Exactly.
So that's not new.
Yeah.
What's new is actually about the parents learning to let go more than the kids taking the risk, and also our definition of what a good parent is, because it's contextual too, isn't it? Because if that mother had gone off to Ibiza and was taking drugs and partying and left the 15-year-old kid at home, would child services have been involved? It's interesting to know about how much of this is a how very dare you, the privilege and all of those things.
Outlouders, tell us, what are the risks you took as a teenager and do you regret them? And what kind of risks would you let your kid take at what age?
Do you want daily Out Loud access? Why wouldn't you? We drop episodes every Tuesday and Thursday exclusively for Mamamia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get us in your ears 5 days a week. And a huge thank you if you're already a subscriber.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful, more perfect. One single injection unlocks your DNA and will release another version of yourself.
For women, aging is like a horror film. They are the words of a reviewer named Paula Froelich, who, just like the three of us, recently saw the award-winning film The Substance. We went out for a little date night on Monday, which was lovely.
We've just developed a Monday night movie date night, haven't we?
Have.
The three of us.
And we're not going to give away spoilers here or analyse the film in great detail. So if you haven't seen it, that doesn't matter. We just want to unpack its premise and what it tells us about ageing.
I think it was a masterpiece.
I bloody loved it.
It was great.
Quick summary of what the movie is
Not
about.
for everybody though, Jessie, right?
No, not for everybody. It stars, I say Demi.
Demi.
What's this about? Demi.
That's just how she says it.
Does
Okay.
she? I say Demi too.
Okay, starring Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, a fading celebrity on her 50th birthday decides to use a black market drug that promises to temporarily create a younger, better version of herself. It's about the deal one makes with the devil when they attempt to turn the clock backwards, chasing youth and beauty at all costs. Qualley, who plays Sue, is the younger version of Elizabeth Sparkle, played by Moore. Written and directed by Coralie Fargeet, The Substance is a satirical body horror film which explores themes of ageism, beauty, our obsession with self-image, capitalism, plastic surgery and misogyny.
Satirical body horror is not a genre I was familiar with.
No, but then you watch it and you're like, yes, it is a satirical horror body.
What's the satirical part? Oh, because there's parts of it are funny.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, it's not realistic. Like it's not meant to be, right?
It's
very
Is that like,
stylised.
are there body horror and horror film? Like, I've never been to a horror film
body
before.
horror film. When they talk about body horror, they mean like there will be blood and guts. It will be gory. You know, there are lots of different kind of horror films. There are serial killer movies and there are spooky things with ghosts and whatever. Body horror is like it's about the gore.
So, Jessie, this is your jam.
I watched every minute of it.
And I
was
know
very
this
into it.
because there were lots of times where I was trying to bury my face in your shoulder and Holly also was looking at you and you were just looking straight at the screen, not flinching, smiling or laughing.
Don't mind a little bit because it was quite funny. It was to
was
serve
funny.
a greater purpose.
It is funny. It's a funny movie.
Holly, you host a podcast called Mid and it's about midlife women. And something we often hear is that they feel invisible. And this is about, in many ways, the opposite of invisible, how the harder you try to chase youth, the more monstrous you become. My question is, can women win?
Well, the answer to that is no. End of segment. Moving on. No, of course the answer to that is no. But that is exactly what this movie is about, Jessie. You are so right. And it's interesting that as Gen X women are moving into this age, 50s and in Demi Moore's case, 60s. And
Is she a Gen X or would she be a boomer?
she might be borderline.
Elder Gen X.
She's elder Gen X. She's a Gen X icon, though, because of her, Brat Pack years. This is a topic that's being explored more and more, right? And this movie is an example of that I think is brilliant because it's not meant to be realistic, right? The characters have no backstory. We know nothing about them. We're just dropped into this world and it's highly stylized and the way that it's shot is very arty and it's sort of broad strokes, the way they set it up. And what is incredibly true is the depiction of the fact that this woman is suddenly being pushed out, right? So she is a TV person. She was an actress. Then she's obviously had a second act as like a Jane Fonda-esque aerobics instructor on TV. And on the morning show every morning, she leads an exercise thing. And she's too old in the eyes of the TV execs. And that's despite the fact that she clearly has done everything she was supposed to do to stay young. So she has had work. She is thin. She has got the long hair, augmented boobs. She's got all that stuff. But still, she is objectively too old now to be attractive and convincing to this audience who the male TV execs think she should be. And I think that what is brilliant about this movie, because it is very over the top and ridiculous, but it absolutely drills home the horror and the very physical violence of the interventions we are prepared to make with ourselves to try and hold on to this bargain, this idea that we can be that. And I think it's interesting because one of the reasons why I'm very scared of surgeries of all kinds, in fact, but obviously cosmetic surgery, is because I've watched too many of those shows that show you it happening. And when they give you a facelift and they literally lift your face up, when you see that, that is a very confronting, violent image that makes you really understand what you're doing to your physical self. And that's what this movie explores.
And it's complicated because it's a violence perpetrated upon the self, which is what this is looking at, I think. And what I've realised watching it, there's a remarkable scene, which is not a horror scene, although perhaps it is the most horror scene. It's when Demi Moore looks in the mirror. She's got makeup on and she's meant to be going to a date and she's kind of being haunted by the image of her younger version of herself. And every time she looks in the mirror, she looks great, but to her, she can only see the lines and how the makeup isn't right. And it's almost like she tries to scratch her face off, like she tries to pull it off because she's so horrified.
Well, at first she tries putting on more makeup and then less makeup, and then she changes her top, and then she kind of tries to do something with her hair. And I think we all know what that feels like when it's like, what's looking back at me? It's not how I feel, and it's not how I want to, what I want to portray to the world. And what can I do to change what I see, which is my face and my body, to conform to what society wants me to look like or sees as desirable and valuable, and this beauty standard that I've internalized. So it's not that yes, she literally has people saying you're too old, get off television.
Yeah. She loses her job.
But she's internalized it as well. So even when there's nobody around and there's no stakes, she applies those same beauty standards to herself. And I think that's what some people don't understand when we talk about the male gaze. We've all internalized the male gaze. It's not actually men saying go get Botox or be skinnier or whatever. We've internalized that, and some people have internalized it more than others. And that's why I always find it very trite just to say, oh, getting older is a luxury and love yourself and love your body. It's not as simple as that.
What that scene spoke to was how much one must have to hate themselves in order to undergo some of these surgeries. So there's a real
or how scared?
Mocking.
No, maybe hate, but also fear.
Fear, but there's a mocking and there's a derision and there's almost like a point and laugh, quite literally, in parts of this movie when it comes to women who try. And there's a story just in the news today about a woman in the UK who has died after a liquid Brazilian butt lift. She was 33 with 5 kids. The tone of it all, it's
mocking.
Blaming, and also like victim blaming to a degree, but
it's like serves you right for being so vain.
Yes.
And so superficial.
And it's about so much more than it's like vanity in a way is the symptom, but that surgery as well as a facelift, as well as a breast augmentation, whatever your choice is, I'm not judging them, but they are full on. Like that takes a lot.
It's not like a bit of hair dye and some makeup.
Yeah. And then when you come out that way and you inevitably do get older, the way that you are then mocked and you're conspicuous in a new way where everyone goes, look at you, monster.
She's had work.
Which in that way I thought that more, like even her casting was very brilliant. Yeah.
I think it was brilliant casting. And I've seen a lot of that, oh, she's so brave commentary and rolled my eyes. But actually having seen the movie, I think she is really brave. But There are things in this movie that will push your buttons if you go and see it, right? Some of the criticism I've seen is that the movie itself seems to fetishize the young body, but then I understand what they're trying to do. What the director was trying to do was to talk about how much we've all been conditioned to desire that, as you say, Mia. But there are a lot of very lingering arse shots, for example. And then also the other part that pushed my button, I started muttering to Jessie about it, is that when Elizabeth Sparkle is her normal old self, because she can alternate between being the young self and the old self, she is a sad old lady, in inverted commas, in her bathrobe who just sits in front of the TV watching infomercials and feeling terrible about herself. And I was like, oh my God, is that what we're supposed to be like? Is that how everybody sees us? Like, there are a lot of, it pushes a lot of buttons, which to me is the sign
Kind
of
of
a
the
really
point.
good movie.
I can't stop thinking about it. And my daughter Coco came with us as well. And she didn't know anything about it. And I'm like, come to the movies with us. It'll be fun. She's like, what the fuck are we watching? I watched it the day before I turned 53 this week, and I woke up on my 53rd birthday just really quite anxious. I'm thinking about it a lot because it's all about at what cost, what price will you pay to look a little bit younger, what financial price, what
physical price,
how much pain will you undergo, how much humiliation, how much risk will you take? And is it worth it?
And sort of like, be honest, do you give a shit what's in the substance? Because that's never really explored, like what it is.
Exactly.
Well, that's the risk, right?
Yeah,
like she takes it without even knowing. It's an amazing film. Like, I know what you're saying. It's funny how those things didn't push my buttons because, I mean, this movie's been described as a primal scream of rage against beauty standards and society and a feminist masterpiece, which I really, really think it is. And I can't stop thinking about it, and all I want to do is talk about it.
When we know what the cost is, I think it's industry specific as well. There'll be lots of people listening where like the industry that they work in doesn't necessarily punish them for aging, and the Hollywood context is a very specific
But I
context.
think everybody lives in the world, and I just think some people are better at shrugging off those beauty standards and saying, I'm not internalizing them. I'm not, or else I'm going to look in the mirror and just go, oh, well, is my neck a bit wrinkly? Oh, well, and some people are just better than others.
I think it's so much deeper. The one thing is I have lines, oh my goodness, irrelevance, invisibility. I'm doing an equation in my head that, guess what, part of it is correct, that my value to maybe the opposite sex or whatever, this is things that we've internalized, might go down. I might feel like people don't listen to me in the same way. The other thing I kept thinking was about how much of our lives we spend feeling old when we're not. Because we're aging, like I'm turning 34 in December, and I've noticed signs of aging because capitalism points them out. I've started having that feeling now. I think that was the point in the movie, was that when she felt, oh, you're not old.
It was a literal manifestation of her being pushed out because she's old.
Yeah.
And that is how old people, and it's true to a point. It's probably less true now than it has been. Ironically, it's also how young people feel about how they can't get in, because like women are always made to feel there are only so many spaces for us, and we can only have these ones for the old ladies and these ones for the young ladies. And these.
But don't you reckon that aging, even more so, like whether it's lines or sunspots or grey hair, the reason that shocks us, and I've seen it shock men, like grey hair, for example, is that we go, time is passing.
Yes.
I am getting older. I am closer to death.
100%.
That's why aging is a horror movie, because it's like the big truth that we all spend our entire lives trying not to think about is imprinted on our faces. And
100%.
That's what that
And that's why midlife crises often look different for men and women. Men might have affairs with younger women or go and start bike riding or training for a marathon, and women will look at surgery, you know? And it's because it's like, well, what does it mean to us to present as younger in the world? For men, it's about virality and physical strength. And for women, it's about aesthetics often.
We have to fight it though, Mia.
I agree.
I can't be in your place of like, well, that's how it is. It's like the only answer is to care less. The only answer.
I don't know how you can.
You have to teach yourself like you do about anything. Like,
It's like the smartphones. If all the parents decide that they don't give the smartphones anymore, then we all have to hold hands and go, let's just do it.
I don't mean to hold hands and all go, we're not doing anything to our faces, but you change it in a monologue. You should listen to my episode about this on Mid, because my manifesto with Ali Dado is all about this.
Will you put a link in the show notes, please? Because
We will. A big thank you. I think that was a marathon show out louders. So thank you for being with us if you're still here. And thank you to our fabulous team for putting this show together. We are going to be back in your ears tomorrow.
Bye.
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 Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There's a link in the episode description.